The briefing had been running for 40 minutes when the phone on the table buzzed. Not a personal phone, the encrypted terminal that sat at the right-hand end of the conference table in the CIA's combined targeting cell, the one whose notifications were routed exclusively through channels that required a specific clearance level to receive, and whose buzzing therefore meant something specific and operational rather than something administrative. The analyst who was presenting stopped mid-sentence, not because the buzzing startled her, because she saw the face of the senior officer sitting across the table from the terminal, the officer who had the clearance to read what the terminal was displaying, and the face told her that whatever was on the terminal had just changed the nature of the briefing she was in the middle of delivering. The senior officer read the terminal. He read it twice. He set the terminal face down on the table with the specific deliberateness of a man who needs a moment before he says the thing the room is waiting for him to say. Then he said it. He said the operation was complete, not the operation they had been planning, not the operation whose target package the analyst had been presenting for the past 40 minutes, in the careful, structured language of an intelligence professional walking a senior decision-making body through the justification for a proposed action, the operation against the target they had been briefing, complete, past tense. The SAS element that had been operating in the same area had gone in 23 minutes ago and come back 12 minutes ago, and the target was in custody, and the site had been exploited, and the patrol was already moving to extraction. The briefing room was quiet for a moment, of the kind that briefing rooms are rarely quiet. Not the quiet of people waiting for the next slide, the quiet of people absorbing the specific information that the thing they had spent 40 minutes discussing in the future tense had already happened in the past tense while they were discussing it, and that the discussion was therefore retroactively a description of something that no longer needed to be done rather than a proposal for something that had not yet been done. The analyst looked at her slides. The slides described an operation in progress conditional. The operation was in past perfect. The distance between those two grammatical tenses was the distance between the CIA's process and the SAS's, measured in the 23 minutes that separated the beginning of the briefing from the beginning of the assault. And it was a distance that nobody in the room was yet ready to describe in those terms, but that every person present could feel pressing against the professional language they were all defaulting to as a way of not yet saying what the distance actually meant. The target had been 11 months in the making. That is the number that the partial record supports with sufficient confidence to state, and it is a number that requires the specific operational context of what 11 months meant in the environment this account is built around before it can be properly understood. The target was not an individual of the kind that intelligence services identify and prosecute quickly, a figure whose profile is clear and whose location is trackable and whose operational significance is high enough to prioritize but manageable enough to address within a normal targeting cycle. The target was a node, a specific and critical node in a facilitation network that had been moving personnel, materials, and funds across a section of the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan for a period that the combined intelligence assessment placed at somewhere between 3 and 5 years before the point at which the targeting effort began in earnest. The node was critical because it controlled the specific geographic and human access that the network required to sustain its cross-border logistics, and because the individual who operated the node had the specific combination of tribal relationships, technical knowledge, and personal operational security discipline that made him simultaneously high value and extremely difficult to fix. The CIA had been the primary intelligence collector against this target for the 11 months. Not exclusively, the combined intelligence architecture that governed collection against priority targets in Afghanistan during this period was genuinely integrated in the sense that product from multiple national collection systems and multiple allied services moved through shared analytical frameworks and produced assessments that neither system could have produced alone. But the CIA's collection effort against this specific target was the most sustained and the most resource-intensive element of the combined effort, and the CIA's analytical team was the team that had built and maintained the target package that the analyst had been presenting when the terminal buzzed. 11 months of source reports from a human intelligence network whose development had consumed an amount of operational effort that the people who knew the specifics of it described, when they described it at all, in the language people use for things that cost more than was originally understood. Signals intelligence processed through analytical frameworks that required the kind of technical capability that only a handful of institutions in the world possessed. A pattern of life analysis from aerial surveillance platforms whose allocation to this target over 11 months represented a prioritization decision that had displaced collection against other targets assessed as significant. The investment was real, and it was large, and it had produced a target package whose confidence rating the analyst had described in the 40 minutes of the briefing as the highest the combined assessment had assigned to any target in the area in the preceding 2 years. The SAS element had been in the operational area for 6 days. Their presence was not connected to this target in any planning document, because the planning documents for the SAS element's deployment described a different operational objective, a logistical node in a different network whose disruption had been the tasked mission for this rotation. The patrol commander's knowledge of the CIA target, of the 11 months of collection, and the high-confidence target package, and the 40-minute briefing that was in progress when his patrol acted, was not zero. The combined intelligence architecture meant that high-priority target packages were distributed to special forces elements operating in the relevant geographic area as a matter of routine, and the SAS element had received the distribution. What the distribution had not told the patrol commander was that the CIA was in the process of running a formal authorization procedure for an action against the target, because formal authorization procedures were not information that was distributed to partner force elements as a matter of routine. The patrol commander received intelligence on the target's location through a source channel that was not the CIA's. The British intelligence element attached to the SAS deployment had its own human intelligence networks in the operational area, networks built and maintained through the same patient, methodical, relationship-driven methodology that the British intelligence approach had been developing since Northern Ireland, and that produced intelligence of a kind that technical collection and even well-developed CIA human networks did not consistently generate against the same target sets. The British source that provided the location information was a source whose access to the target's movements was direct in a way that the CIA's networks in the same area were not. And the information the source provided had a timeliness and a specificity that translated directly into a window. The window was 2 hours. The patrol commander was 40 minutes from the location. He had the target package from the distribution. He had the source intelligence giving the location and the window. He had a patrol that had spent 6 days in the operational area and had conducted the close observation and route preparation for their tasked objective, which meant they had a detailed picture of the terrain between their current position and the target's location. He did not have authorization for an action against this target. He had authorization for an action against his tasked objective, which was not this target. The action against his tasked objective was scheduled for the following night. He committed the patrol at the moment the arithmetic of the window and the distance resolved. He did not communicate the commitment to the British Task Force headquarters before he moved, because the communication would have consumed time that the window did not have, and the decision to move was a decision that the patrol commander's training and the regiment's operational culture and the specific institutional framework of SAS operations had prepared him to make alone in exactly this category of situation. The category was, the moment is now. The authorization process is slower than the moment. The capability is present, and the intelligence is sound. Move. The regiment had been making decisions in this category since the North African desert in 1941. The patrol commander's decision at the moment the arithmetic resolved was the current expression of an institutional reflex that was 80 years old. He notified the British Task Force headquarters at the moment the patrol was already moving, which was the correct sequence rather than the reversed sequence, because the correct sequence in an intelligence window situation was to move and notify simultaneously, rather than to notify and wait for acknowledgement before moving. The British Task Force headquarters received the notification, assessed it, and made its own decision, which was to let the patrol run while activating the support architecture that an unplanned direct action required and that the patrol would need for extraction and any contingency. The support activation was managed by people who had managed similar situations before, because the regiment's operational culture produced situations of this kind with a regularity that the support architecture was designed to accommodate. The CIA's briefing continued through this period. The analyst presented. The senior officers around the table reviewed. The legal review element that was part of the authorization process worked through the target package. The coordination with conventional force elements in the area was in progress. The ISR allocation for the proposed operation was being arranged. The aviation planning for insertion was being developed. The process was running as the process was designed to run, at the speed the process was designed to run at, because the process had been designed to run at a speed that served all the objectives the process was required to serve, which included not just the operational objective of getting to the target, but the legal, institutional, and oversight objectives that a formal CIA action against a human target in a partner nation's territory required. The process was serving those objectives. It was not serving the window, because the window was not a variable the process had been given. The patrol reached the target location 41 minutes after the commitment. The source intelligence was accurate. The target was present. The close observation that the patrol established in the final approach confirmed the target's presence and the disposition of the armed personnel in the location, which the patrol commander assessed as consistent with the target package's threat assessment and manageable within the entry team's capability. The entry team was 4 operators. 2 remained in cordon. The entry was at the primary point. The assault took 14 minutes from the first movement off the observation position to the patrol commander's call that the site was secure. The target was alive. 2 armed individuals who had resisted were not. 3 individuals who had not resisted were secured. The exploitation of the site began at the moment of the secure call and ran for 11 minutes, producing materials that the patrol commander's initial assessment identified as significant on the basis of the quantity and type of documentation and electronic media present. The patrol withdrew from the site at a time that the combined record places at 23 minutes after the entry, which means the entire action from the moment the patrol was in position to the moment it was moving away from the site took 37 minutes. The window the source intelligence had estimated at 2 hours had 43 minutes remaining when the patrol cleared the site. The buzzing of the terminal in the briefing room happened 12 minutes after the patrol cleared the site, when the notification from the British Task Force headquarters moved through the combined architecture to the CIA's operational cell. The analyst was presenting Slide 11. Slide 11 addressed the proposed entry methodology and the specific structural layout of the target location as the aerial surveillance had mapped it. The senior officer read the terminal and set it face down and said the operation was complete. The slide was still on the screen. The entry methodology it described was the methodology for entering a location that had been entered 23 minutes ago by a patrol that had not been part of any planning discussion the room had conducted. The structural layout it described was the layout of a site that had been cleared, exploited, and vacated. The aerial surveillance imagery the slide was built from was current as of the previous morning. The site it depicted was no longer the site it had been the previous morning. It had been visited by 4 men with a specific purpose, and they had completed that purpose and left, and the image on the slide was the record of a location before the visit, and the terminal on the table was the notification that the visit had happened, and the briefing was the gap between those 2 states. The 40 minutes of future tense planning that the 23 minutes of past tense action had rendered archaeologically interesting rather than operationally relevant. The subsequent conversation in the briefing room has been described by 3 people who were present in terms that are consistent in their substance and careful in their register. The register of people who are choosing words for the specific purpose of not saying the thing that the situation is most directly suggesting, while also not pretending the thing is not being suggested. The thing being suggested was the comparison, the 40 minutes of briefing against the 23 minutes of action, the 11 months of target development against the 6 days in the operational area. The full authorization process with its legal review and its ISR allocation and its aviation planning against the patrol commander's arithmetic at the moment the window and the distance resolved. The comparison was present in the room, and it was not spoken directly, and it was not going to be spoken directly because the people in the room were professionals who understood that the comparison, spoken directly, was the kind of thing that created institutional friction in a bilateral relationship that both sides valued and that both sides needed to remain functional. What was said, in the careful register, was a set of questions about the British element's operational basis for the action, the source intelligence that had produced the location, the authorization status of the action within the British chain of command, and the deconfliction protocols that had or had not been followed. The questions were legitimate. They were the questions that the combined operational relationship required to be asked and answered when a partner force element conducted an unplanned direct action against a target that was simultaneously the subject of a formal authorization process in a different chain of command. The answers were provided through the combined liaison architecture in the hours following the briefing, and they were, by the accounts of people who received them, complete and accurate. The British element had acted on credible source intelligence with a narrow window. The patrol commander had notified his task force headquarters contemporaneously with the commitment. The task force headquarters had assessed the notification and activated support. The action had been conducted within the patrol's standing operational parameters for unplanned direct actions under time pressure. The authorization question, the question of whether the patrol commander had authority to act against a target that was not his tasked objective, was answered in the way that SAS operational authority was always answered in contexts of this kind, which was by reference to the standing parameters that the regiment operated under, and that granted patrol commanders at the relevant seniority level specific authority to act against priority targets of assessed significance when the intelligence window precluded prior authorization. Those parameters existed because the regiment had been operating in environments where intelligence windows precluded prior authorization since its founding, and because the institutional experience of those environments had produced the specific framework that allowed the regiment to act when the moment required action and the authorization process required time, the moment did not have. The CIA's authorization process did not have equivalent parameters, not because the CIA had failed to anticipate the need for them, but because the CIA's operational framework for human target actions in partner nation territories was built on a legal and oversight architecture that required the authorization process to be completed before the action, without exception, and that the parameters for unilateral patrol commander authority that the SAS framework contained were not compatible with. The CIA's framework was correct for what it was designed to do. It was also, in the specific situation that the terminal notification had just described, a framework that had produced a 40-minute briefing about an action that had already been completed by a force operating under a different framework. The file that was generated by the combined incident reporting process in the days following the operation contains the full record of what the British element did and what the CIA process was doing when they did it. The file was classified at a level that placed it above the standard distribution for combined operational reporting, and below the level that required congressional notification. It sits in that space, accessible to the people whose positions give them access to that classification level and not accessible to the oversight mechanisms that operate below it. The classification was appropriate. The file contains source intelligence information whose protection was operationally necessary, and it contains the specifics of the British element source networks in the area whose exposure would have been genuinely damaging to ongoing operations. It also contains the comparison. The file does not state the comparison in the direct language that would make it legible to someone reading the file without operational context. It contains the times, the timeline, the sequence of events, and the record of the briefing's progress when the terminal buzzed, and the comparison is visible in those facts, the way that the conclusion of an equation is visible in its terms. The people who read the file and had the operational context saw the comparison and understood it and noted it in the ways that professionals note things they have understood and are not going to articulate in writing in an official document. The ways of not writing something in an official document are themselves a kind of record, and the people who know how to read official documents can see where the not writing is happening. The analyst whose briefing was interrupted by the terminal has been described by people who worked alongside her as someone who processed the experience with the analytical rigor she applied to everything. She did not express frustration, she did not express admiration, she expressed, in the conversations her former colleagues have described, a specific and carefully bounded professional curiosity about the source intelligence that had produced the British element's window, and that her 11 months of collection had not produced in the same form. The curiosity was genuine, and it was professional, and it was bounded by the institutional framework within which she operated, which was a framework that processed the question of how the British source had produced what her sources had not into a collection methodology question rather than a capability comparison. The collection methodology question was tractable. It could be worked on. It could produce improvements to the CIA's human intelligence approach in the area that would narrow the gap the next time a situation like this one arose. The capability comparison was not tractable in the same way, and the analyst understood this. And the understanding was what made the curiosity carefully bounded. The capability comparison was not about collection methodology, it was about the individual operators and the institutional framework that had produced them, and the 40 years of operational history in environments where intelligence windows precluded authorization processes that had generated the standing parameters under which the patrol commander had acted. Those things were not tractable to a collection methodology improvement. They were the product of the SAS being what it was, which was an institution that had been building this specific kind of individual capability for 80 years, and that would continue building it after every other variable in the operational environment changed. The briefing was not rescheduled. There was no target to brief against. The target was in the detention architecture. The slides were filed. The 11 months of collection that had built the target package was noted in the Combined Intelligence Archive as having contributed to the successful resolution of the target, which it had because the target package had been in the distribution that the patrol commander had received and had informed his assessment of the target's significance and the appropriateness of acting on the source intelligence that gave him the location. The 11 months had mattered. They had not been the thing that caught the target, but they had been part of the context that allowed the patrol commander to assess that catching the target was worth the commitment of his patrol in an unplanned action against a deadline. The intelligence from the site exploitation fed into the combined targeting cycle in the weeks following and produced a series of subsequent actions against nodes in the network that the exploited materials had identified. The subsequent actions were planned through the full authorization process on the American side and through the appropriate approval chain on the British side, and they were executed at the tempo the planning processes allowed. They were successful. The network was degraded in ways that the combined post-operation assessment rated as significant and durable. The degradation was the cumulative product of the unplanned action and the planned actions that followed it, and the combined assessment distributed the credit accordingly, which meant that the 11 months and the 40-minute briefing and the patrol commander's arithmetic and the 23 minutes from entry to clear all existed in the same record as contributions to the same outcome. The file held them together. The classification kept the file where people who needed to understand the comparison could read it, and people who would have asked the questions the comparison raised without the context to understand the answers could not. The file is still sealed, not because the operation is sensitive in the way that operations involving current source networks or ongoing targeting efforts are sensitive. The networks and the targeting efforts it describes belong to a period that the passage of years has moved into the historical rather than the active. It is sealed because the institutions that hold it have made the assessment that the specific combination of information it contains, the timeline and the comparison and the record of a formal authorization process running concurrently with an unplanned action that completed before the process finished, is not information that serves any current operational purpose and that creates a specific kind of institutional visibility that neither the CIA nor the British Ministry of Defence has an interest in creating. The visibility is the visibility of a document that shows in a single timeline what the two institutions' operational frameworks produce when they are applied to the same target with the same intelligence and different processes. The CIA's process produced a 40-minute briefing that was still running when the terminal buzzed. The SAS's framework produced a patrol commander who did arithmetic for 4 minutes and moved. The file holds those two facts in the same document. The classification holds the document where the comparison cannot be examined without the context to understand why the comparison, though it says what it says, does not say what it appears to say to someone who sees only the surface. What it appears to say on the surface is that the CIA's process is slower than the SAS's framework, and that the speed difference is a failure of the CIA's process. What it actually says to the people who read it with the context the file provides is that the CIA's process is designed for a different set of objectives than catching a single target in a 2-hour window, and that the SAS's framework is designed for exactly that objective, and that in the specific situation the terminal described, the SAS's framework was the applicable tool and the CIA's process was not, and that the reason the CIA was running its process was that nobody in the CIA's operational chain had the source intelligence that made the SAS's framework the applicable tool, because the source intelligence was in the British Elements network and not the CIA's. The analyst's 11 months had not caught the target. The British source had. The patrol commander's 4 minutes of arithmetic had. had. The 23 minutes from entry to clear had. The file contains all of it. The seal is on the file. The terminal is face down on the table in the memory of the people who were in the room when it buzzed. And the analyst slide is still on the screen in that memory. Entry methodology, future conditional, and the operation is already done in the past perfect. And the distance between those two tenses is the file, and the file is sealed, and the comparison is inside it, where the classification keeps it, available to the people who need to understand it, and not available to the people who would see only the surface and miss the thing underneath that makes the surface legible. The patrol commander's name is not in the file in any form accessible to this account. The source who provided the location intelligence is not named and will not be named. The site is described by grid reference in the operational record, and the grid reference corresponds to a location that exists in the geography of the operational area, and that has not been described in any public source. The target is in the detention architecture somewhere in the system. The 11 months of collection that built the target package is in the combined intelligence archive. The 40-minute briefing is in the memory of the people who were in the room and in the partial record that the combined incident reporting process generated, and that the classification holds in the space between standard distribution and congressional notification. The terminal buzzed. The senior officer read it. He set it face down on the table. He said the operation was complete. The slide was still on the screen. The briefing was still in the future tense. The operation was in the past perfect. The file is sealed. The comparison is inside it. The distance between the future tense and the past perfect is the distance between the two frameworks and the two institutions and the specific capabilities they produce. And it is measured in the 40 minutes and the 23 minutes and the 4 minutes of arithmetic that resolved the window and the distance and sent the patrol toward a target that 11 months of the most sophisticated intelligence collection operation in the world had located, and a source in a British network had fixed, and a warrant officer's arithmetic had caught before the briefing finished its 11th slide. The people who know what the file contains have carried the knowledge in the way that operational professionals carry the knowledge of things that the institutional record has decided to hold at a classification level above the conversations that most of the people who would benefit from understanding them are cleared to have. They carry it without bitterness, which is not to say without feeling, but without the kind of bitterness that would require them to believe that the classification was wrong in the way that wrong classifications are wrong, which is the way of being wrong that serves institutional ego rather than operational security. The classification of this file serves something that is genuinely operational, even if it is also genuinely inconvenient for the institutional comparison it prevents from being examined. The source networks whose protection the classification primarily serves are sources who operated in an environment where exposure was fatal, where the intelligence they provided moved through channels that the adversary was trying to penetrate, and where the specific detail of how British human intelligence networks in the area accessed information that CIA networks in the same area did not access is precisely the kind of operational methodology information that adversaries study and adapt to and exploit if it becomes visible. The classification is therefore correct for the right reasons and also convenient for reasons that are not operational, and the people who know the file's contents understand both of those things and carry both of them without resolving the tension between them, because the tension is real and resolvable only by changing either the classification or the operational security requirement that justifies it, and neither of those changes is within the authority of the people who carry the knowledge. What those people will say, in the oblique register of professionals discussing things they cannot discuss directly, is that the file contains a timeline that sits in a single document, the way that two photographs of the same landscape taken at different times sit side by side, showing the same ground in different states, one before and one after something significant has happened to it. The timeline shows the CIA's process moving through its authorized sequence toward an action against a target that is, at the end of the timeline, no longer present in the form it was present at the beginning. It shows the SAS patrol moving through an unplanned sequence toward the same target. It shows the two sequences running simultaneously without knowledge of each other until the terminal notification brought them into the same room at the moment the SAS sequence was already complete. The timeline is not an indictment. The people who carry the knowledge are careful to say this and careful to mean it, because meaning it is the condition of saying it honestly, and they are professionals for whom honesty about operational matters is the basis of professional credibility, and professional credibility is the basis of everything else they do. The CIA's process did what it was designed to do. The SAS's framework did what it was designed to do. The two designs were not designed for the same objective in the dimension that the terminal notification made visible, which was the dimension of operational speed against an intelligence window measured in hours rather than days. The CIA's process was designed for a broader set of objectives that included the speed objective but did not prioritize it above the legal, oversight, and operational security objectives that the process also served. The SAS's framework was designed for the speed objective specifically, built on 8 decades of operational experience in environments where the speed objective was the primary constraint, and all other objectives were required to be served within whatever the speed objective allowed. The 8 decades are what the comparison resolves to when it is followed to its conclusion, not the collection methodology, not the authorization framework, not the legal architecture or the oversight requirements or the institutional cultures. Those are the forms the 8 decades take in the specific operational context the file documents. Underneath the forms is the duration. The SAS had been building and testing and refining its specific framework for acting on narrow intelligence windows in denied environments since 1941. The framework that the patrol commander applied when the arithmetic resolved was not a product of his individual capability, though his individual capability was the instrument through which it was applied. It was the product of every operation the regiment had run in the 80 years before he was born that had produced the lesson that intelligence windows required action at the speed the window allowed, and that the framework for enabling action at that speed had to exist before the window opened rather than being constructed while the window was open. The CIA's operational framework was built after the OSS was disbanded and before the specific operational requirements of the combined campaign in Afghanistan had fully revealed themselves, and it had been refined continuously since its founding in response to the operational lessons each generation of operations produced. And it was therefore not a static or unreformed thing, but a continuously evolving thing that had been moving toward the capability the terminal notification described for as long as the institutional and legal and oversight constraints it operated within allowed it to move in that direction.